And I think that we are live. Hello, dear friend. How are you?
Hello. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm perfect. I'm very glad to have you today here. So thank you, first of all, that you cleaned your schedule and being with us. It's really appreciated. But before we start, I just want to get some feedback from our viewers before we begin the broadcast. And I want to make sure that people can hear and see us clearly. So I just want to get to our Amazon nonstop group. Actually, it's in Hebrew, so I'm not sure that you can find it by yourself. But if you have some viewers abroad, I believe that we can share our link. And now I'm in the group and I can see that we have our first viewers, so everything is fine. So, dear people, dear viewers of Amazon Nonstop, you're welcome to comment and, of course, to share this very interesting live that await us in your personal profiles and help to other people to enjoy the really helpful information that we will share here very soon. So I will take a minute to do it by myself. I want to share this webinar from the group to my personal profile, as I do every time, and I can see that we get new messages. First messages, of course, Hanit, as usual. Hey guys, good to see you. Look and sound great, Hanit. I can't see you now, but I'm sure that the same in your side. So, okay, so we will start right away. And I want to say hello to our representatives of Avask company. That all of us met here in the Holy Land in the recent month, but the guys that here with us didn't visit yet, but they promised to visit, right, guys?
100%.
Absolutely. It sounded like a very good trip, so it's definitely on my bucket list.
So you heard nice experience from your friends. We got nice reviews.
100%.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, 100%. I mean, for anyone who went from our team, we've had a whole debrief about the event, and they only spoke positively about it.
Amazing. So feel free to visit us this summer again. Prepare yourself. I'm sure that we're going to create some nice events. We're working on something, but we'll get more details. We will post more details soon. Not really soon, but it's something that you should wait for. But we're not talking about events tonight. We're talking about other things. So for those who doesn't know, who are Avask and what are you doing and who are you, Eli and Frederick, please tell us a bit about yourself and what is the main subject that we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah. So Avask started as a VAT compliance service provider, and since then has broadened their services massively. So they started off with a very tailored approach with a very much of a for your client basis. So what they then decided on doing is that the clients had more and more requests on services that they initially wanted. So we very much still follow that strict procedure where, okay, client comes first, consultancy is a must, and we want our clients to be as best informed as possible. But with that, there came a new requirement for different services. So we since then have branched out into customs, so international trade, and EPR, and also incorporating into different countries if there's a requirement for it, and so on and so forth. So it's since the initial start, just over, a little bit over 10 years ago, we've grown massively, but very much still follow that tailored approach to all of our clients, as we believe a good flow of communication and a good relationship is at the heart at every business.
Perfect. Amazing. So I think that it's nice time to start the presentation that you prepared now. So as usual, I want to say to our dear viewers that you are welcome to ask questions. And of course, I will direct the question to our experts. And your presentation now is live. So, but we can see us. Yeah, now it's better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that. So today we thought it would be a good idea just to talk about 2023 and preparing your e-commerce business, right? So we've had a couple of rough years recently, and we took that into account and thought, look, what can we take from these experiences and how can we develop from them? And we really then just took a focus
in Israel, we say how we can make a lemonade from lemon.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. That's the procedure we wanted to follow. So that's exactly what today's presentation will be about, or today's webinar, with different aspects of the business in itself. So Ellie, who is our EPR program lead, will talk about everything EPR related naturally, and myself will be talking about the customs and VAT side of things as well.
And about EPR, I believe.
Yes, everyone's favorite subject.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So if you don't mind going on the next slide.
Okay, perfect. Can you see? Okay.
There we are. Yeah.
You can switch from slide to other slide by yourself. It's
perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah. So just as an overview, this is us. I'm sure that we will want to have some flow of communication with you listeners as well. So don't be scared to reach out if there's anything that you'd like us to clarify further on. More than happy to do that. And then, yeah, Ellie, would you like to give a bit of a brief overview about yourself and what you'll be focusing on today?
Yeah, of course, definitely. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. And Igal, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. So thank you so much for having us. My name is Ellie. I am the program lead for the EPR department here at Avask. Been with the company for around 2 years, and I think EPR is a new solution that we've implemented in order to assist sellers like yourself in really that expansion into Europe. Europe's such an exciting place to be trading. It does have some additional hurdles, but these hurdles are all solvable. And what we want to achieve here with this webinar today is just letting you know all of these solutions, what we can do to help you guys, and making all of those hurdles slightly less intimidating when it comes to expansion.
Fantastic. So our agenda today, which we've slightly touched upon earlier, is just, yes, the VAT implications, what it actually mean, what we mean with VAT and its systems, OSS, online marketplaces. So having a look at online marketplaces specifically, how they function, what can you do to utilize their functions, and then importing naturally. So moving your inventory into Europe at the heart of your possible expansion, then talking about EPR and your strategies for 2023. And then what we'd like to do is have a small Q&A session so that we can take your questions on, just as we feel it'll be good just to end up lightly with some questions and answers.
Perfect.
So if we maybe start with VAT and what it means. So to trade in Europe, most cases, what you want to do is actually hold your inventory in Europe, right? Reason being is, in terms of logistics, for instance, it can be very costly to have frequent inbounds to clients directly. So what we looked at is, okay, how can you utilize systems for local storages? And with that, you incur a requirement for VAT registrations. So this allows you to file for relevant VAT returns for any sales, and then naturally it will also allow you to store. With that comes the EORI number, which allows you to actually clear goods through customs. It's in some aspects an extension of a VAT number, specifically also for the UK. And then we'll also talk about customs declarations. Meaning that for any import, naturally there is taxes that you pay on imports, so import VAT, which you can either reclaim or defer. But we'll also touch upon the different countries and advantages and disadvantages that come to certain countries, just so that you have a complete pilot overview about your strategies.
Okay.
So we briefly spoke about VAT. Now you may have noticed that this was a country-specific registration. So a VAT number would, for instance, allow you to store in one country. An OSS number differs so that to circumvent the issue that you might have if you're wanting to store in one country and then sell into different, right? So if you're VAT registered, for instance, in Germany, but want to sell to your French clients or your Spanish clients, if you don't have an OSS number, you'd have to be VAT registered in each European country so that you don't become uncompliant with VAT regulations. So what has been implemented since is essentially an OSS registration. So you have a VAT number of one country and an OSS registration, which allows you to file, collect and remit to a single registration for any distance sales. So if you're selling into France, you'll use that OSS registration so that you don't incur any penalties or anything like that. Further explanations to that can be probably if you have an online marketplace that you sell on, right? So if you sell on an online marketplace, such as Amazon out there, it's a classic example, just purely that, because Amazon actually have some form of an OSS registration. So if you store in Germany and through Amazon you sell into France, you don't need an OSS registration because that online marketplace collects and remits any VAT liability for you, making your life a whole lot easier when
Much
you
easier,
yeah, definitely. I think you also have a greater reach from clients, right? So it's especially when you want to think about growth into Europe, you always want to make sure that if you are expanding into a different market altogether, you want to make sure that your reach is as broad as possible initially, just so that you can build a client base, right?
Of course.
So I think that is usually step one for me, is to figure out what the online marketplace and its facilities has got for you to use, essentially. If we then have a look at the role of the OMP, so this is just an explanation about how can you see if your online marketplace will actually facilitate this so-called OSS registration or an OSS filing system of a kind. In most cases, it's already highlighted, as we have on the slide, if they're seen as the deemed supplier, meaning that if the online marketplace has got an agreement in place where they accept the liability of you maybe not having complete control of where your client base is that you state that the online marketplace in fact has to file, collect, and then actually also remit all of these VAT returns for you for countries that sell to clients directly, if it's outside your VAT registered country. So this can come in many forms. It doesn't necessarily have to be Amazon only. I know that Wish is recently actually picking up with registrations in Europe, purely because they have now had a complete rebranding in 2022, end of 2022, where they've decided, look, we've acknowledged that previously in the Western side of the world, there was a huge profile for Wish that it's mainly sort of goods sourced from China, you know, the classic of, oh, it might not be the best quality, but it's cost effective for whatever reason. So they've now had a rebranding, and we're actually seeing things picking up there, saying that, okay, more people want to make sure that they're not missing out on the next big wave of a marketplace that could effectively push their sales out to thousands, right? Classic example of that would be TikTok. No one expected really that a platform used for filming, dancing and whatnot is now one of the largest marketing content out there, right? I mean, I've, for instance, had a client who used TikTok for only a couple of months as for a comparison, and naturally they already had a client base, but through TikTok they implemented a sort of code at the end of their videos to track whoever goes on their website can, finishes a sale, get like 5% reduction or whatever it may be. And he says he had over 20,000 new orders come in through his website.
Wow,
and
amazing.
Yeah, I mean, those numbers you can't get with any PPC ads or anything like that, right? Within that short amount of time. And it's purely because TikTok's algorithm is so heavily personalized that if you stay too long on one video, you can't scroll away from them. They keep popping up. You keep on seeing this similar content, and the product sort of gets ingrained in the back of your mind, right? And that's effective marketing. So it's definitely look at different strategies, look at different online marketplaces, and make use of whatever they may have available. It might not be 100% prevalent at first, but never write anything off immediately, I'd say. I think we spoke a bit about online marketplaces, and what we can have a closer look at is actually what do you need, or what should someone look out for when you do want to move to the European market. One big part of that is you have to be aware of EU regulations, and they can come in different forms, if it's product compliance or if it's representational requirements, which is this indirect and direct representation that I'm going to talk about now. If, for instance, you are an entity that is incorporated outside EU, which will probably be the situation for most people, you will need some form of local representation if you want to have imports into Europe. Reason being is that your company, or if you're acting as a sole trader, you can't represent yourself in the eyes of customs because you are outside that jurisdiction, right? Which is why you'd look out for an indirect representative in that case, because indirect meaning you apply for a third party who takes over that liability for you. On the contrary, if you're someone who does incorporate in Europe because you want to split liability, for instance. So if you say my market in the US is working so well, or in Israel, and I think changing over to Europe is going to be a big step. So I want to make sure that I want to separate these two projects, essentially. If you incorporate in Europe, you only need direct representation, for instance. So if we or the direct representative wouldn't necessarily take any liability over, but they'd still go communicate with customs authorities on your behalf so that you can do what you can do best, and that is sale, right? You don't want to talk to 15 different people just so that you can move some inventory. It's a waste of time for you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I often have the case that to talk to the relevant person, because I am who has to talk to 15 different people, it often is a bit of a stretch. So I can only imagine what it would be like as a seller when you have that times 10, right? Because you have it in different avenues. If it's your marketing department, if it's if it's imports, or if it's product compliance, and then within that you've got different sections. So it can be quite a lot to deal with in the end of the day, which is why you've got these different setups. And then naturally Brexit, that was a thing that made the trade in the UK.
If it was complicated until now, we have now more parameters to make it more complicated.
It's well, luckily the dust has settled, right? It's no longer a mystery. At least it's been a bit of a trek, but me as a German, naturally, I was very much involved in the whole thing, and tried to learn as much as I could from it. So from the get-go, when it did happen and we spoke to client, it was, I will give you as much information as there is out there. Most cases, there are even authorities who had like not a 1 to 10 steps they could follow in order to make sure something happened. It was trial and error in some cases. Thank God that phase is over. Like that was painful. But yeah, now it's essentially similarly to EU. If you're incorporated within UK, direct representation is what you need at most. If you're incorporated outside, indirect representation. So it's just seen as a it's no longer part of the EU, so it's a different region. It's as if you were importing into the US. You know, the requirements change per country now, but that's what we're here for. Consultancy is key, and advisory is free. So it's completely up to you what you make of these different countries that are now, or were initially difficult to tap into, but now because so many people scared away from it, might be an opportunity for you to look at. Especially if you're already in the US. I mean, same language, right? So it makes it a lot easier as well. You don't need to translate into languages you may not be 100%.
Even though it's a bit different, like the kind of the slang and the mentality.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the client profile probably changes a little bit because some things that sell well in the US because it's,
as I heard from colleagues that sells in the US, and they told me that they make a complete change in their listings in the UK. But still, you're right. It's the same language.
Yeah, at least it's not the translations that you're spending money on, right? And then I think I've spoken enough for the bit. I'll hand over to you, Ellie, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
Amazing.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to speak about probably the thing that's been on everybody's lips at the moment over the last couple of years. It's something that's very new. It's something that people are very scared of. It's something that people don't need to be scared of, as long as you've got the right information. And hopefully I'm going to clear up some of kind of the myths or some of the questions that people may have about EPR today. I think now as we move closer and closer to all of a lot of the EU countries, 2030 is a big looming deadline for a lot of the climate change situations. I mean, Freddie and I were talking earlier about like climate change as a whole and how this December, especially in the UK, it's been one of the mildest Decembers I think I've ever experienced. It's 10, 12 degrees. It's very warm. It's not. It doesn't feel like Christmas. Didn't feel like Christmas this year because
I had to delay my skiing holiday. It's been terrible.
and it's something that every year it gets more and more important. And I think especially when we're moving towards looking at your businesses, your selling, it's about how do we create a sustainable selling future for your businesses and being that one step ahead of the curve when we're getting to putting products onto the market, looking at how we can change our products, how we can change our packaging in order to make a better influence on the selling community and also on the planet itself. So that's kind of where EPR came from. It stands for Extended Producer Responsibility. And although it's been a new thing that people have been understanding about, people have been learning about over the last couple of years, it's not a new thing initially. It started in the late 1980s and has kind of flown under the radar a little bit for the last couple of decades, but has now become very prevalent in the European market, and especially something that people need to take into consideration when they're expanding into Europe. So it's essentially an environmental policy that means that people who are selling onto markets or manufacturing or importing into certain countries now need to take responsibility for the goods that they're putting onto those markets. So no longer is the obligation sort of to deal with the packaging waste and things like that on the end consumer. It's now being pushed onto the people that are actually introducing that for the first time onto the market. So by taking responsibility, those that are considered the producer of those goods or putting that good onto the market for the first time will be required to pay this thing called eco-contributions, which is essentially a dressed up way of putting a small taxation which goes back into the environmental economy to fund the sustainable disposal of the products that are being put onto the market. So we're looking at not just a taxation on those goods going into the countries, but that money is going back into the sustainable sort of redevelopment, repurposing, recycling of those products and creating that kind of circular economy of the goods going onto the market, but then also being regenerated into something that is potentially better for the environment as well.
It's almost tackling some of the packaging that you face as well with for instance, some of the online sales I've noticed. If I buy let's say a phone, sometimes they come in huge boxes, don't they? So it's essentially to combat the unnecessary waste that comes with that, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's making not only sellers more aware, but also online marketplaces also have an obligation themselves as well. So it's looking at that shift between, okay, let's package things as much as we can, make things as kind of protected as possible, potentially with the wrong things, in order to make our goods look more appealing and something like that. But what it is taking that look at is how do we make our goods look appealing, but also thinking about the environment at the same time. So what it means with the new EPR regulations is every liable entity must essentially alleviate those impacts that their goods are having on the environment throughout the entire life cycle, not just the goods going into the markets, but also their end result as well.
Great. So I got a small question about that subject on my WhatsApp. So is it necessary to report only the primary packing or the secondary packing together as one?
Yeah, so the ways in which, like you mentioned, EPR is categorized into certain categories per country. So at the moment, it's only relevant for Germany and France, and they deal with that question kind of in separate ways. So both of them have the packaging category in which their goods could fall under. Everybody packages their goods. The way Germany deal with those, with that packaging is they do look at the primary and the secondary packaging. So the primary packaging being the immediate packaging that the good is put into. So if I'm selling like a face cream or something, it's going into a box. That is my immediate primary packaging. If that is then being put into another box in order to transport it to your customer, that is my secondary packaging. And what the German authorities really look at there is the material of that packaging, what it's made out of, and then also how much that packaging weighs. So what we look at sort of on an annual basis is how much of that material, how many kilograms, for example, are you putting onto the German market with your primary and your secondary packaging in order to calculate that eco contribution. The way in which France then deal with that, they don't care so much about the secondary packaging, so they're not interested in that transport packaging just at the moment. Whether that then changes over time, that's anybody's guess at the moment, but they're caring very much about the components of your packaging. So what they look at is, let's say my example with the face cream, you're looking at the tub that face cream came in and also that immediate box. If that face cream has like a foil that's protecting it as well from it kind of exploding in the box, then that is also considered another part of packaging. So you'll see kind of like the different countries have different ways of looking at the legislation. They very much have their own rules, and I'm hoping over time, like with that, things have
as I told before, if it was complicated until now.
I'm hoping it will consolidate as we sort of as the legislation grows. I think we first started looking at EPR just before the beginning of 2022, and the amount that has changed since its sort of birth, it has been kind of overwhelming, which I hope they'll look for a way to consolidate all the differences over time. But yeah, that's a great question. There is a difference per country, so it's not kind of one size fits all. But that's why you have experts to guide you through all of these differences as well.
Thank you for the detailed answer. So we can continue with the presentation.
I mean, for a change, Germany isn't the most complicated one, so I'm happy to hear that.
Surprising.
Yeah, honestly, their tunnel vision normally is but
it's still the stricted one.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
We can't win them all.
So I mentioned the word producer earlier, and just to give a bit of clarity on what that actually means. So in EPR terms, the producer is the person that is manufacturing the product subject to EPR requirements in a certain country. So if I'm a manufacturer located in Germany, I am considered the producer of that good. If I'm importing a product into those countries, or if I'm selling a product subject to EPR requirements. So even if you're an Israeli seller selling into France and Germany, you still have an obligation as you're making that sale to the customer in France and Germany. So if you're considered a producer through any of the three above points, you are required and obligated to provide these things called EPR registration numbers to online marketplaces, or if you're only selling on your own website, you will still need to register as well. It just might not be so strictly audited. So there is a registration requirement for these numbers, which I believe, if you go to the next page, that would be lovely. So we discussed a little bit about packaging earlier. And I mentioned that the two different countries have sort of different scopes. One thing about EPR is you will require a registration number per category that your good falls into. At the moment, there are 9 different categories in France, and there are 3 different categories in Germany. So if I'm selling, let me give you an example of a product. If I'm selling like a mobile phone into France, I will need to register for 1 packaging registration number, 1 electronics registration number, and 1 batteries registration number. Wow. If I then want to sell that good into Germany as well, I will also need 3 registration numbers from Germany also. So it's not just 1 registration number per country or 1 registration number per category across the board. It is very much each individual country has each individual registration numbers as well per category. Which is why I mentioned earlier, I'm hoping that there's going to be some sort of consolidation in the future. At the moment, on the screen, you can see that there are 9 different categories that France have introduced. These were introduced as of January the 1st of last year. It's sort of been a phased introduction. It's very much not quite like the Germans where they had hard deadlines for everything. It's very much the obligation was put onto the marketplace. So what you might have noticed, if you're selling on Amazon, eBay, they may have a remit option that has been put into place. So this is where the marketplace will pay on your behalf and then remit that money from your Seller Central account if you're selling on Amazon, for example. What the problem is with that I foresee is that you're not having complete control of the data in which is being processed and given to the authorities. I would always say, although it seems like an overwhelming task to make sure that you're registered for all the individual categories that you need to be, it's very much, you want to be looking at your independent data. Also, the likelihood is that Amazon or eBay or Wish are not going to be able to facilitate that remit option forever. Therefore, the obligation is still always going to be there for you to register for your independent numbers. Also, France are going to be introducing some new categories, which I believe are on the next slide, over the next couple of years. So it's very, very important. And if you take anything away from this section of the webinar about EPR, is know your products, or get somebody involved that can help you know your products as well. If you can see on the screen, there's a whole load of categories that are also coming in this year. Some of them have already been implemented. Some of them are very much on their way by the end of the year. And then as we move towards 2025, we've got some new categories going on in there as well. Anybody that's selling into one of these markets will have packaging, but also it's definitely worth speaking to somebody about what you've got on top of that as well.
Yeah, I think beginning of the year, I had a client who was selling these light up jumpers, the Christmas jumpers with like the fairy lights in it, because they're massively in trend for like bad taste office parties, right? So that was a real, they did very well, but because they didn't have like overviews to what they were actually paying, it was always like a gray area, which I mean is great, but because out of sight, out of mind, right? But at some point, it's probably best to be informed. So yeah, it was an interesting conversation I've had with them regarding what they needed, because they're blissfully unaware, but it's always, yeah. I think these conversations do a lot when you have a deep dive into one person's sales, right? Because then you can actually dictate, okay, based on what you're selling, this is what you need to worry about. Everything else, don't worry, like forget about it, and then that becomes a lot easier to deal with, I feel.
Yeah, definitely. Luckily, Germany has been slightly less complicated in terms of the categories, which I believe is on the next slide. So from January the 1st of last year, and you really started to see the introduction kind of around July time. If you were selling into the German market, you would have been hit with the packaging deadline, which was July the 1st of last year. So in Germany, they have the 3 categories: packaging, electronics, and then batteries as well. With the electronics, there is an upcoming deadline which has been extended. It was January the 1st of 2023, but it has now been moved 6 months ahead for July the 1st, 2023. So you've got that little bit more extra time to get those registration numbers in. What marketplaces have been doing, and they've been really cracking down, especially on the German side. So where I mentioned the remit option potentially on marketplaces for the France side, with the German side, it's not quite as easy. The German authorities have really cracked down on marketplaces not providing that form of solution, and you have to directly go to a provider in order to register, in order to be selling onto those into that market. So with these numbers, if you don't have them in place by a certain deadline, then marketplaces are obliged to remove your listings, delist anything that falls into that category but doesn't have a corresponding registration number. So it's worth knowing about these categories, it's worth knowing about this legislation, and as it grows, knowing about your obligations as well, and what potentially could happen if you're not registered. At the moment, in terms of financial implications, there aren't any in place, but no doubt there'll be penalties later down the line. But also, I would say potentially that not being able to sell your products is almost worse than a financial implication, because it means that your business is not functioning anyway. And then moving from 2023 onwards, so beginning of next year, this time next year, we'll be looking at single-use plastics in Germany as well. So that's really going back to what I was saying at the beginning about tackling that all-important climate change, moving away from those single-use goods that everybody is kind of grown to love and dispose of, but it really is like we need to be looking at reusable. So I think if there's any message from EPR, it's very much know your products, know exactly what's going on with what's going into what markets, but also look at the way in which you're packaging your goods. I think packaging is a really good one to hone in on, because everybody sells something that's packaged, and especially in the way that those two different markets work. If you're selling something into Germany that's wrapped in loads and loads of plastic, that eco contribution that you have to pay at the end of the day is going to be much higher than if it was in a smaller cardboard box that potentially didn't need all that bubble wrap or didn't need that plastic packaging. Better for the environment, better for your cash flow, and at the end of the day, happy planet, happy people.
Okay, everybody happy. And we have some question from Sagi. Sagi asks if the payment for EPR eventually will come from Amazon Seller Central, like we not pay directly to local office, right? When we know how much it costs us once we submit the report in the dual system.
Yes, so I mean, from an Amazon perspective, unless you have registration numbers in place that are independent and you're governing them, or you've got a service provider that are governing them independently, then that they will continue to pay on your behalf unless you have those numbers. So the only way to sort of circumvent Amazon getting involved or other marketplaces getting involved is to independently register with a service provider that is able to register that for you. So that's kind of a way of skipping over that additional cost that marketplaces might be putting on these registrations and making sure that what you're being charged for in the eco contributions is solely what you're putting onto the market and not potential other administration charges or data that is not 100% accurate. What I would also say, and I would urge everybody to just take note of, is it's not just what Amazon is doing or what eBay is doing is very much focusing on their own marketplace. So what they're doing is they're only looking at your Amazon sales. They're only looking at your eBay sales. You're selling on other marketplaces. That's double the amount of contribution that you're paying because one marketplace is taking that money from you. Another marketplace is taking that money from you. If you're independently registered and you're submitting that information to the authorities, that is all of your marketplaces, all of your sort of website sales and that sort of thing. So all of that is consolidated in one. So you're not kind of encountering any additional charges and that sort of thing.
And you also don't have to deal with the countless tickets you have to raise with Amazon as well. You're far from that.
I think also just to touch on the eco contributions, it is very much country specific as well. And like I said, there's no doubt that people are going to be putting additional charges onto that. And it's very much in Germany, they may be slightly higher. In France, they might be slightly higher, but marketplaces are likely trying to level that out. So I would just say my go-to would always be, and I am slightly biased, but I see it on a day-to-day basis where people are registering through marketplaces, and it does turn out a lot more expensive. My kind of guess would always be it's best to go independent rather than.
Oh, sorry, the presentation was incidentally disconnected.
It's all right, no worries. I think I focused a lot on France and Germany, but also just to let everybody know that obviously new year, new fun countries are coming up as well. So on the screen, you'll be able to see just lots of different flags about different countries that are being introduced this year. So if you are selling into any of these markets, please be aware that between now and December, there is going to be some form of obligation as well in place to make sure that you're kind of taking into consideration those goods that are going onto those markets as well.
What I find bizarre as well is that for Amazon, they will sort of take responsibility in some countries, but not others. So you have that with France where they pay these contributions, right? But then for Austria, for instance, they say they're staying clear of it. So then you are left trying to find yourself someone who does.
What is the reason? Like, it doesn't make sense. So what is the reason, by your opinion?
I think the reason is in different countries, as a marketplace and as a seller, you have very different obligations. So some authorities have very much been pushing the marketplace obligation, and some countries have been very much putting it onto the people that are actually selling the goods. So it's very dependent on the authorities and their rule. It's also sort of from a online marketplace perspective, it's much easier for them to kind of sit back and enforce that. But it really is dependent on the country. I can't really comment on what the future is for that sort of system, but at the moment it does seem to have a stark difference.
Sounds like to sell in Amazon Europe, like all over Europe, it's kind of solving a puzzle, or a kind of put together a puzzle, because it's so many parts with different images, and like it's a huge mess. So I'm getting more and more happy that there is such service like yours. Yeah.
No, well, thank you very much. It's very kind of you to say, but that is what we're here for. And even if we can solve a small part of that puzzle, it's a puzzle piece that you didn't have to solve yourself. So
with countless hours of research.
I'm not interested in solving this puzzle. So guys,
that's all right. I am.
I mean, I'm very happy with that.
We are sellers, so we just want to sell and advertise.
Exactly. Let us break our backs and necks about things.
Next slide, please. Just touching back on these eco contributions. I know I've spoken about it already, but they must be paid directly to the relevant organisation. They're called PROs for anybody that's interested. It's that essentially your EPR version of the tax office. They're called PROs because it's broken down to producer responsibility organisation. Eco contributions are defined on the product category in which you're selling, the device type, the product attributes, but most importantly, the number and the weights of the goods, the units sold within that EPR category. So like I mentioned before, the number of mobile phones going into Germany times by the weight of those mobile phones in each category. Next slide, please. Thank you. So preparing for returns is something that is really important and very, very true to my heart at the moment, as we are in the midst of our very first filing cycle for EPR. So filings are done on an annual basis for every category apart from electronics in Germany. So what that means is at the point of registration, you will do a forecasted filing of what you think is going to happen in that year ahead. So if I was to register right now, I would be looking at what am I going to sell on the German market in 2023? A complete estimate. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. You could base it on last year's sales. You could just be completely making it up on what you hope for. But it is a requirement to forecast for the year ahead. What we then do at the beginning of the year after, so we'd look back on the data in which you did sell in that year. So the January to December of every single year, we look back on the previous year. what you've sold into certain markets and what you've sold into each individual category per country. So on the screen, I've got a small example of just the type of data that we've been looking for. It's not sort of your average sales data. It's very much a new form of kind of data that needs to be provided that is specific to EPR. So we'd be very much looking at the product itself, what country that's going into, again, that all-important units, and then also that all-important weights per category as well. What online marketplaces have very nicely done is they've been spending all of 2022 building lovely reporting sort of software in order for people to be able to download those reports. Amazon have been very ahead of the game, and they have their reporting already. Other marketplaces will be following. What it means is that you can just click a button and that report is downloaded based on your Amazon sales. What that then also would require you to do is any off Amazon sales, they need to be added to that report as well in order for an overall representation of the year that's just gone. So everything's very much, we forecast for what the year ahead is going to be, and then at the end of that year, we look back about what that year has happened. At the point of the forecast, whatever you say that you're going to be forecasting for that year, you pay that eco contribution up front. So that is paid at the point of registration for those numbers. What then happens is in the annual filing cycle, you would then submit that data for the year previous. We look at what you've actually done, and then that amount is then reconciled. So if you predicted a slightly more successful year than the one that you had, or if you predicted slightly under, but you've had a much more successful year, then you just pay the difference, or you get credited for the amount that you paid. So it's just about learning a different way of reporting. Hopefully other marketplaces will jump on board with easier solutions. But I think a big kind of note that I would take is make sure that you're aware of what data needs to be provided. And if you're not going to use a solution that's been put on by an online marketplace, just be aware of the sort of formatting, the data that is required in order to submit these returns successfully.
So more Excel spreadsheets for everyone.
Yeah. Love them. Next slide. I think that's all for me.
Fantastic.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you for the session, Ellie. It was amazing.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. So we had a brief look at 2022, and I think from the conversations I've had with a lot of my clients, I sort of got a few tips and tricks from them, what they've experienced themselves, because I know that for you guys, that's probably most interesting, right? Something that you can relate to. So we looked at, okay, if you are looking to ship with, or to FBAs, for instance, for Amazon, if you want to replicate whatever you've got going in Israel or the US, and you want to do that in the EU, then that's certainly an option. And initially on the onboarding process, you'd actually get given an account manager in some cases as well. So that's something I would immediately make use of, because you have someone you can talk to, so you're not sort of in that trail of ticketing if you want to get a response again. And with that, they look at your different countries and how they're performing, and they say, okay, great, we believe that we can do something about your storage, right? So because it's all based on algorithms, they will tell you what you need to do to achieve more storage capacities. In most cases, it's naturally sales and frequent inbounds. So shipping volumes that is relevant to your storage capacity, and then getting rid of those volumes as quickly as possible through sales. So with that, a natural transgression into optimizing your listings is essential, where you look at not only, okay, am I using the best ASINs, but am I using the best keywords? Am I using the best pictures? Are they watermarked? What can I do to develop them? Like, what's going well? What is selling well? What can I do to develop different products? It's definitely important to have a continuous look at your listings. And I mean, you probably know this better than I do. It almost comes into a routine at some stage, which is making sure that everything is okay and not something has failed all of a sudden. But then also, of course, Amazon have got their, or also the online marketplaces, in fact, actually have their promotions, right? So if it comes on forms of Black Friday, Christmas deals, or Prime days, or anything like that, make sure that whatever you are wanting to sell has relevant promotions in place. So what we've seen is if you're one of those sellers that would like to make use of a promotion, but actually have it not influence your P&Ls too much, so actually you still get the same type of profit margins, is you post a listing at a certain value, and instead of having the promotion deduct the complete, listing value for you, you increase the value of your listing a couple months prior to the promotion, to then when the promotion hits, the actual deduction just gets you down to your regular pricing. And that way it would say that there is a added or value of 50% off, let's say, but in reality your price of the goods remain the same, and you still get the same amount of profit margins that you would have initially. So stuff like that is really important to look at. Naturally, if you have a certain strategy in mind where you want to have a customer relationship with them, having something personalized and keeping the retention of your clients in place is equally important. So what we've seen is people writing in letters in their products, and I've had a client who sells cosmetics products relatively successfully in the UK, purely because he says, "Thank you very much for your purchase. If you've got any products regarding this, please feel free to drop me an email under, or please feel free to reach out to me under." And then there's a LinkedIn QR code, so where they can scan it and then ask the company relevant questions. And that in itself, not a lot of people actually utilize. It's just little things that you can look to do. And then color schemes, naturally, in terms of packaging, is also very important. So we've got our lovely green behind us, but there's science out there that says green is also very nice to look at, and is a lot less aggressive than, let's say, red in some cases. So it's these little things make a big difference in the end of the day. Then what we also looked at is things like coupons, which have recently actually taken more of a notice in the whole of Europe and the UK. So actually I've recently, because believe it or not, I'm somewhat into fitness, so I looked at kickboxing equipment, and I bought some shin guards, and it was who delivers via Prime, because I don't want to wait 5-6 days in order for my product to arrive. I wanted almost next day delivery. So I opted in for delivery depot, or delivery these storage boxes, so I can pick it up the next day. And also the product in itself had a coupon code to use, which gave me £5 off of my product. And to me, that was a selling point between someone who had exactly the same value, exactly the same listing reviews, and the same product, essentially, with just slightly different pictures. But because he could undercut his competitor or her competitor, then that to me was already more value to me, right? So to me, it was a logical step. I think we also then looked at omni-channel approaches. Omni-channel essentially means that you look at a broader scale of things when you're looking at online marketplaces, and further to that as well. So you look at things like, where can I sell my products effectively? TikTok has now implemented a store, which to me, if you would have asked me a year ago, I would have thought it's literally not even interesting to me, because it's mainly for the younger people and whatever. That is now massive. You have a lot of marketing that's going on in there, and you have a lot of I've seen actual people who sell or who rent out their flats to companies or anything like that. They advertise the flats on TikTok purely because you have this. It's almost like you're there. Effectively, they show you the place around, and they say, okay, well, this is this on Avenue XYZ, listing prices that. Go have a look, inquire, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, that actually looked pretty good. I want to have a look. So there are different strategies you should apply, and omni-channel strategies definitely something, because not only are you saying, or let's put it this way, can you afford not to make more money on different marketplaces? Because you're limiting yourself to a single marketplace. Are you doing enough sales to say, I don't need anything else. I'm very happy with where I'm at. It might be a thing of scale where you're looking at, okay, if I'm scaling to different marketplaces, I need to devote more time, but put that time to someone else, make it someone else's problem, essentially like us, right? Where we then focus on, this is what you need. I'll give you a list of 1 to 10, or even less in most cases, of what we need from you. And then we'll do the rest for you. Because if you then just to decide, oh, I don't want to use eBay in Germany, even though in some cases it's more popular than Amazon, and you're missing out on a lot of sales. And that can, I think that in some cases also influences your customer base, because the more prevalent you are on different marketplaces, the more esteemed you become and more people know of you, and that naturally helps. Then key product category is sustainable products. Naturally, anything environmentally friendly is now a selling point, right? If you buy coffee capsules for your coffee machine, because I know I can't do without it in the morning, I now am forced to look at things that, okay, is it good for the environment? Plastic bottles have got it on there as well. Is this a recycled bottle? Is this something new? Do they actually recycle? All of that is now more and more a thing. And I feel like that is something that will naturally also influence the sales on online marketplaces, right? If your stuff isn't made from sustainable resources, then you're left with a product that will, you're left with the product not knowing if you can actually get rid of it. And at some stage, what you want to do is resell to the client, right? So it has to have a due date, and it has to be able to be recycled so that you look greener. So that's also something to consider. And naturally, finally, brand marketing, which we highlighted with my favorite, of course, TikTok. But there are things like Wish, for instance, initially might have shown a bad light if you're on it, but now I think with cultural changes, not only between countries, but also these marketplaces and their clientele, you can notice a huge difference in them. Naturally, your listings will have to be somewhat personalized to the online marketplace, but it's value that you're getting out of these things. So I think it's something that you should always look to personalize. Do shopping video ads. Some companies out there like these cameras that are implemented. So if you're shopping for shoes, you just film your foot, and all of a sudden that shoe shows up, and you see if that actually suits you, if the colors make sense to you. And then all of a sudden it's a sale because you just had a fun experience shopping online that you might not have had when you're in the store trying on 15 different shoes. And you said, okay, this is all too much for me. I'm bored now. Can I leave? You can now do it at your own leisure, right? So that's always something to consider.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a small, not me, like one of our viewers, Sagi, have another question. If we non-Europe company, but we have German VAT number, can we still register to OSS?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. So what a non-European company would look at is an OSS registration in the country that you have a VAT number in, and the ones that you do most traffic in. So if you have a VAT number in Germany but want Europe-wide sales, you get the German OSS number, and that covers you for the whole of Europe. So I think instead of paying for 9 different VAT numbers, have one and have that OSS number to begin with, create your client base, and then sell through that.
Yeah, it's more clever.
Yeah, get a taste from where your strong suits are in which countries, then maybe have an aggressive approach to that country where you then get the VAT number and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it's down to personal preference, naturally. If you want to do things like market penetrations on an aggressive scale, or if you think, okay, I will first look at demographics, look at which age group is more likely to buy my products, which country has the most e-commerce sellers, which country does the most revenue, then yeah, I think OSS is the most simple solution for you.
Okay, perfect. So we still have some slides in the presentation because we're getting to the end.
Yes. How much time do we have? Would you like me to run through these?
We actually more 5 minutes.
Okay, well, I think we briefly touched upon why run a promotion anyways, so I don't need to go into too much detail about it, right? I think you as a seller at this stage probably have a very good understanding as to what benefits these promotions bring to you and how you can improve discoverability, which I noted on the presentation as well, about your brands, right? I think I don't need to go into too much detail there. And we did speak about maximizing the impact about your promotions. Yeah, again, non-watermarked images is usually the biggest factor, and then actually having proper backgrounds for your products as well, right? So that you don't have like a product that's just leaned on top of a sofa bed or anything like that, but you have like a white, clear background, so it looks more professional. First impressions last, right? So the first picture that you see naturally will influence what a seller might think about these products. So it's a lot to focus on. And then naturally, if it's a product that they're venturing into and they might not use on a regular basis. For me, for instance, it was skincare because I had atrocious skin for a couple of years, especially through COVID, because didn't go outside much. I then looked at skincare products and had a look at, okay, what benefits does it bring me if I use this? How do I use it? And then I had to look at YouTube videos and how to apply things properly. I felt really silly, but it worked, right?
Yeah.
I think if we use the next sort of couple of minutes just for questions and answers, if there are any, I think that'll be good.
I want to see if we have another additional questions. And yeah, I see another question from Sagi. If we choose that service via Amazon service provider, the process works good or it's hard for the seller to deal with it, and it's better to do it outside of Amazon?
So actually excellent point. So these, it's what he's referring to is that currently with Avask, most companies that you find on these called SBN or Amazon partnered providers is that they have two types of solutions in place. One being you have the so-called Amazon VAT, which is only any sales that occur on Amazon will be reported on these, and it's a very manual thing to do because if you don't love spreadsheets, it's going to be a bit of a pain for you, but you have to report everything that you do, and then so that your end of monthly, quarterly, or yearly filings actually make sense. You have a lot of manual inputs. Whereas if you compare it to the normal VAT services, you have this indirect tax consultant at Avask who actually knows your company and has a personal relationship with you, handles absolutely everything, so that you don't have to talk to tax authorities in 10 different languages, and they will handle it all. Meaning that if you have a question about, how do I invoice this, even if it's outside of Amazon, they can handle it. All you have to do is send them the invoice and say, please manage, and they will do it, right? Unless you've got any specific questions about how VAT filing is done, or am I okay from the past 3 months because I feel like something happened with my previous provider, then that's absolutely something they can take on an individual basis.
I think the main difference between the two is obviously Amazon VAT Services is a great solution that Amazon have put in place. It is very much a hands-off service, so you are kind of you talk to a team rather than have an individual account manager and that sort of thing. It's very much a basic service, whereas I think if you were looking to go for a more comprehensive service, you wanted a little bit more guidance, somebody to kind of say, okay, well, this is potentially a better route for you to go down. This has not been going so well. How about we look at this? Or just kind of general advice, and have someone there at the end of the phone that is able to offer that advice and give you a bit more confidence in selling and where is potentially the best place to look at and that sort of thing. That's where I would edge towards more of a dedicated service provider and that sort of thing, which is something that we provide. It just gives you that peace of mind to know that everything is going in the right direction rather than just be governed by software.
Yeah, I think Ellie comes from a VAT background as well, so from that very department, and currently I think still holds the record for the person that managed to get the VAT diploma the quickest. I tried to compete. I was a little bit off, I would say, by 2 or 3 months, but it was yeah. So Ellie definitely has a bit of personal experience from that area as well.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer. We have another question from Iris. If you have OSS number and VAT in Germany, but still you must do your accounts paperwork in each country separately, right? Like in European PAN?
So the setup is slightly different. So the easiest way to describe it is if you have any B2C sales from your website, let's say, outside of Amazon, and you have that number, your VAT agent, if it's someone from Avask, we will just take the invoices and do relevant filings. So you as a seller don't necessarily need to spend time into, okay, well, this was a sale that went into Italy, or these sales went into France, or these went into Spain. Naturally, it helps us massively if you categorize these. But for anything filing, it's definitely something you just want to discuss with your tax consultant. Yeah.
Okay. So perfect. Thank you for that question, for that answer. Let me check if we have another additional questions. I see that we don't have any more questions, but guys, you're in the group, right? Or
Yes.
Not yet?
I think we are as a company, not individuals.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can say to the viewers that if they will have another additional questions, they can direct the question directly to you via Facebook, or I don't know. We will talk about the contact method in a couple minutes. Okay, so we're talking about it. So I just want to say that the subject was super interesting for me, especially. I learned a lot, but especially I learned that if I want to start my business in Europe, I have to pay attention for a lot of small details. So at least in my opinion, I'm not interested in learning all these things by myself and taking care of everything by myself. So I just want to ask you how we can start a relationship, like what you can do for me, like if you have 360 degrees solution. And I also heard that you prepared some special benefit for our group members, so I would like to hear about that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think best way to contact us is just by sending an email, or if you want to write in the group chat, we can actually get back to them as well. And reach out personally just to make sure that all questions do remain answered.
And we can see your emails now and your full names on the screen. So
absolutely, if you just say
even for a question is okay, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, because I focus on international trade, it's such a broad subject. I think the best way to marinate information, because I know this was relatively heavy, is just to have a follow-up call where I can then discuss anything that was maybe not 100% clear. I can walk you through processes, or just give you a brief understanding about things. I think just to build a relationship has so much more value to it. So yeah, by all means, send an email, and I'm happy to help out.
Yeah, and definitely everybody that has taken part in this webinar today or has seen the recording as part of the group, we also have a special promotion code as well, which is IGAL 2023. Personalized.
I just want to say I didn't choose the code. you can with the code already prepared.
That was our gift to you. So that entitles you to 50% off of registration for VAT.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. 50%. It's really nice. We appreciate that benefit. Thank you for that. And for those who want to use this promotion, you can see the code on the screen now, IGAL 2023. Thank you for that, guys.
Not a problem.
So guys, we're getting to the end. I want to check if we have another questions or everything is clear. I believe that everything is clear because I can see here more questions. As I told before, you're going to stay in our group. All the members of Avask already in our group. So you can post some questions in English, of course, if they want to direct the questions to you, and you can contact directly via emails or from the site to Frederick and Ellie, who made amazing impression on us because we already had the really high standard because we met your group in Israel last summer, but we see that it can go higher. So
thank you.
I want to thank you for that amazing, detailed, and clear presentation. For your vibes and for the information and for cleaning your schedule and being with us now because I don't know what the time now in England. In Israel it's pretty late. So guys, go home, take rest. Thank you for that, and we will be in touch. It was amazing webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. See you in Israel. Don't forget.
Yes, absolutely. See you soon then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.